With Steven Universe returning next week on the 17th for weekly episodes, or at least that's what Cartoon Network is claiming so far, I will hopefully have many more good things to say about the series very, very soon. So, I decided to take a little bit of time this week, rather than creating a normal theory, to talk about some of the negatives about Steven Universe, at least as far as I perceive them. This is going to be a quick video. I don't want to spend a lot of time on negativity. I'm just in a place in my life right now where that doesn't feel like it would be a very good idea. And I want to be clear, I am not declaring myself some SU critical, as the Tumblrism goes, by offering critiques of the show. You guys should know at this point that I do have criticisms of this show. But I would hope that I have done a good enough job of representing myself at this point that you realize that that's not the entirety of my opinions on Steven Universe. It's only a fraction of them. I'm also going to be addressing stuff about both the show and the network that airs it, and a little bit about the fandom that's built up around it too, as well as the anti-fandom. As while I do not blame the crew for the negative aspects of the fandom which its show spawned, the negative aspects of the Steven Universe fandom are at least tangentially related to the existence of the show. Those people might still be kind of crappy people without Steven Universe around, but Steven Universe being here did give them a reason to show their colors. And I want to be clear, just as I feel capable of criticizing this show without going full negative, I do acknowledge that the majority of fans also have criticisms of the show that don't take them fully into the negative regarding their views of the show, or even cause them to behave badly as fans. The few criticisms that I do want to voice about the fandom in this video are directed only at the people who do the specific things that I'm criticizing them for. That said, let's actually start there and get it out of the way first of all. Some Steven Universe fans are just the worst. And I get it, every fandom has people like that. There's an absolutely fantastic YouTube series that I watch pretty regularly, RPG Mongers, The Fandom Files, which delves into the negative sides of fandoms in remarkable amounts of depth that I wouldn't want to go to when analyzing something with such a negative connotation to it. And just from watching that series, it's easy to see that evidently every fandom has people like this in it, and because people like this tend to be the most vocal, it is these negative people who tend to be what the fandom is best remembered for once it starts to die out. I'm talking the kind of people who harass the crew for any reason. Even if someone has a legitimate reason to be angry with a member of the crew or to criticize a member of the crew for something that they have done recently, you shouldn't harass a person. That is just objectively wrong. Harassments, death threats, doxing, the kinds of things that the existence of the internet and the anonymity that comes with it allow people to partake in with fewer consequences to themselves. I hate those things, despite the fact that I am a petty, petty son of a bitch, and sometimes want to partake in them myself, because I am such a petty, petty son of a bitch. This kind of relates to the second thing that I want to criticize the Steven Universe fandom specifically for, and that's becoming the kind of fan of the show who does nothing but hate on the show. I get it. Sometimes hating something is a lot of fun, and you can feel really validated for hating something that you perceive as hate-worthy. But that doesn't make it right, and I'm so sick of seeing it. Just like I'm sick of seeing long 2-hour videos, or hour-long videos, or 40-minute videos calling out Steven Universe in their titles, calling it garbage, and yes, I am calling out exactly the video that you think I am when I say that, which do nothing but overblow the show's flaws and the perceived flaws of the people who make it, to create the impression that Steven Universe is somehow worse than Hitler, and if it is allowed to exist, will lead to the regression of society into something more negative than what it is today. That Steven Universe is an objectively negative force upon society, despite the fact that the legitimate criticisms levied in such videos are no more than reason not to like the show. They're the kinds of criticisms that anyone might have for a show that they just don't enjoy, that doesn't land with them. And I want to be clear, I am not upset with such people for levying such criticisms. I do the same thing with shows that I like and shows that I don't like. My issue with these types of videos and these types of critical responses in general, not just regarding Steven Universe specifically, is how overblown they are, purposefully so, to make the situation seem worse than it is and get people riled up. Criticisms of this type come across more like propaganda than actual critique, appealing to people's emotions rather than making a logical case for why your opinion is the way that it is, as criticism should be. And sure, I get fired up emotionally too, sometimes, but I don't let that define my identity or try to use that to secure some modicum of fame for myself within a community, which exists almost like a cancer within another community from which a lot of people derive one of the more positive aspects of their existence. A lot of people find positive representation in Steven Universe, representation which speaks to themselves personally. Seeing these overblown criticisms of the show pop up, calling it the worst thing in the universe, or pure garbage, or claiming that just because the characters in Steven Universe are seeking a potential peaceful solution to the war with the diamonds means that Steven Universe is pro-fascist somehow, that calls into question whether or not those people were right in identifying with these characters, and that could call into question their very identity and be very harmful for them. And it would be one thing if that's actually what Steven Universe as a show was doing, but it's not. Let's take that one example again and examine it more closely. Yeah, the diamonds have done horrible things, and yeah, if the show ends with a peace between the crystal gems and the diamonds where the diamonds face absolutely no consequences for what they've done, I do think that that'll be problematic. I really do. But seeking a peaceful coexistence with an enemy which can wipe you out with the wave of its hand, seeking a peaceful coexistence with anyone with differing viewpoints from your own, redeeming a villain, those are all good things. Like, you can argue when they're appropriate, but this is fiction. This is supposed to be an idealized version of the world. Steven and the Crystal Gems wanting to seek redemption for the diamonds and a peaceful coexistence with Homeworld and maybe even a chance to change Homeworld society for the better rather than just wipe out its governing system and leave it with nothing. Those are perfectly reasonable things to happen in this show. You can argue, of course, whether or not they are the most appropriate of the reasonable things to be happening in this show, but they are still reasonable things to be happening in this show, and they certainly don't make the show or the crew pro-fascist or pro-Nazi, which I want to remind you is the example that I'm speaking of here. This is a criticism that people have levied against this series. I feel like I have to remind you of that because it sounds so ridiculous. But I've already talked about this stuff more than I intended to, so let's move on to criticisms of the series itself. I still, to this day, do not feel like making Rose and Pink Diamond the same person was a good idea. I get that it sort of sped up the process of Steven finding some amount of common ground with the diamonds, but I still assert that there had to have been another way for him to find that common ground in the first place. Now, I will admit that this upcoming batch of episodes could very well change my opinion on this, and I expect that they probably will, as this upcoming batch of episodes seems to be about Steven taking up the role of Pink Diamond in order to try to change the minds of the other diamonds. That specifically is something that he could not have done if he was not Pink Diamond's son. And with the way that the diamonds have been developed as characters, maybe that is the only way that he can get through to them anytime within the next couple of centuries or something. But I want to be absolutely clear, I do think that Steven is the kind of person who, given enough time, could have found common ground with the diamonds without this pre-existing relationship having to exist. And if the crew really is claiming that he couldn't have done that without being Pink Diamond's son, I feel like they're doing a disservice to their own character. I also feel that Rose being Pink Diamond does elevate her from being just a gray hero to being a borderline villain. Recent episodes have allowed me to understand her point of view better, but I still feel like she made mistakes that she didn't need to make, that as a diamond she shouldn't have made in the first place. Mistakes which would have been perfectly understandable if she was a quartz, a gem that wasn't even built to lead, trying to stumble through this leadership role as best she could. I also hate how Rose being Pink Diamond is being used to explain away all of her powers. Back when Rose was just a quartz, all of the powers that she had worked as a metaphor for her having found her true self after rebelling. Once she stopped limiting herself to the role that Homeworld had imposed upon her, she discovered all these new abilities that she never would have known that she possessed otherwise. Her being a diamond and those powers coming from the fact that she's a diamond diminishes her quite a bit, I think. I also really hate the way that character models are handled by the animation team. Like, I get that the characters only really having relative sizes compared to each other that aids in the animation process, because it means you can be a little more sloppy and have a little bit more freedom in what you animate without things going too off model. But all of those videos and all of those social media posts showing how much the characters have shrunk over time and how odd their proportions have gotten, those are accurate. Steven used to be able to stand next to the counter in his home with the counter being at about chest level without standing on a step stool, and now he can't. Now he has to stand on a step stool just to reach the counter. And that's, I'm sorry, but it's stupid. That goes so far beyond wanting the character models to remain fluid so that you have more freedom when animating those characters that it's almost hilarious. I don't like throwing around the word incompetent because the word incompetent implies that the person that I'm referring to with it is entirely unskilled, but this borders on incompetence. And it would be one thing if they animated the characters like this in episodes where the visuals aren't all that important and where more squishy and stretchy character models would actually be beneficial to the story being told. But they also animate characters like this in important action scenes or when they're interacting with equipment that is meant to tie into the overarching mystery plot of the series. It just doesn't make any sense to me that in those episodes, at least, they couldn't step up their game a little bit. Especially since we know they can. The battle between the Crystal Gems and Blue and Yellow Diamond was fantastically animated. All I want is more serious episodes to be animated with that level of quality. Or at the very least, more scenes like that to be animated with that level of quality. I am also, admittedly, pretty annoyed by how poorly the characters integrate with the backgrounds sometimes. That is another aspect of this show's animation which I feel borders on incompetence. And the way that the crew spaces out episodes is just really weird to me. Like, I didn't notice it as much in the first season, for example, because back then, most of the episodes felt like filler until you looked back later and realized they weren't. But nowadays, now that we know more of the truth about Homeworld and most of the mystery has been solved, I don't understand why the crew feels the need to space things such that we get like 4 or 5 townie episodes, then like 1 plot episode, and then 1 townie episode, then like 4 or 5 heavy plot episodes. I don't get why they don't space those out differently so that we get more Homeworld related plot stuff more often, with fewer of the more down-to-earth and therefore less exciting townie episodes breaking them up. But I do feel like I know why the crew does this. Most of the townie episodes, it doesn't really matter where you space them relative to heavy plot episodes, so the crew technically would have some freedom when scheduling which episodes go before and after which episodes, if not for the way that Cartoon Network schedules the show. And this is the thing that I hate the most about Steven Universe, and yes, I acknowledge that this is on the network and not on the show itself. But I absolutely detest the way that Cartoon Network schedules this show, waiting to air them in pockets, like the pockets of episodes we've been getting recently. Like, remember when a bunch of episodes aired really close to each other used to be called a Steven Bomb because it was a big deal? Now that's just how we get every grouping of episodes. It's ridiculous. And I think that's why the crew spaces the episodes out the way that they do. I could be completely off base about this, but wouldn't it make sense if they space things out so that we get every episode in a Homeworld-centric plot all within one of these groupings of episodes, so that we don't get a couple of Homeworld-centric episodes and then a couple of townie episodes and we don't get the resolution to that Homeworld stuff for 6 months or something? Like, that's the only reason I can think of why they would space the episodes out the way that they do. But that doesn't mean that the way that these episodes are spaced, the way the series itself is paced overall, isn't a problem. Because it leaves fans looking back at entire seasons and seeing large stretches of time where nothing really substantial was happening. And it leaves them wondering just how much of this show is as good as they remember it being, and that's not something you want your fans walking away from your show thinking about. Whew, that's really all I wanted to say in this video. I just wanted to get all that stuff off my chest. And thinking back on how I presented all of this information, I got a little more impassioned than I originally thought I was going to, which means that my cartoon avatar is not going to have the expressiveness to convey the level of emotion that I was putting in my words. And since I don't really see the need to include any clips in this video either, I'm probably just going to edit this one into a podcast style similar to my recent video where I gave my thoughts on the newest season of Doctor Who so far. I'll even try to remember to include a download link to the MP3 version of this video in the description so that you guys can download it and listen to it offline if you want to. Maybe that's me being a little lazy, not wanting to put too much effort in this video, which, all things considered, has left me with a bit of a bad taste in my mouth because I don't like criticizing this show or its fan base to begin with. One way or the other, though, I'd like to know, what do you guys think about anything that I've said in this video? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below or on my Discord, link in the description. But either way, this has been AJ22 and I will talk to you guys later.